Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 2 of the People Economy Podcast. Today's episode is with Howard Behar. Maybe you have no idea who Howard is. Howard actually, well, you'll hear in his story, but if you know anything about a coffee company named Starbucks, Howard Behar has a lot to do with that. And honestly, he's the reason I decided to combine everything into one podcast, because the first time I talked to Howard, he opened up deeply about his depression, which was not how a conversation with Howard Behar I thought would go. And he talks a little bit about it in this episode as well. But it just reminds me, we're all human. We all have the same struggles, no matter how big our business actually gets. Howard Behar, my friend.
Yes, sir.
You came out of a family business,
Yeah,
and then you met this coffee company named Starbucks when they were tiny.
right.
What did you learn in those early days about leadership and people that still guide you today?
At Starbucks or before Starbucks?
So when you first got to Starbucks.
No. Well, you learn that typical entrepreneurial companies always believe their business is in as that they're in as the product that they sell or the service they provide. And by that time in my life, I was a believer in that it really wasn't about the product or service. Those are important things, obviously, but it's about the people. That the way you build businesses or any organization is always about the people. And what that really means is how you treat each other, how you treat the people that you're serving. And so, that's what I saw a product centered company with not an understanding that what it was really about.
That transition's perfect to the next question. Your
Yeah.
book, It's Not About the Coffee, you wrote in 2008, 2009. Looking back now, what message would you say is still very urgent, and what do you think has evolved since then?
I don't think it's changed at all. It's still about the people. And when you get off track on that, you start to make mistakes and results start to go down. And that's basically what happened during COVID at Starbucks. They didn't exactly know what to do. I mean, a lot of businesses, a lot of organizations didn't know. There was conflicting messages. And so they were doing all sorts of things. But the thing they didn't do was ask their people what they should do. And so that got them in trouble. It ended up getting them a union in a number of stores because people felt they weren't represented, that they weren't being listened to.
Hmm. You often say the broom that sweeps the floor should choose the store.
And the person who sweeps the floor should choose the broom.
Choose the broom. There you go. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, how did that leadership principle emerge?
Well, what I believed is this, that everybody should get to vote. If you bring people into an organization, you bring them in for a reason. That means that you should trust them. Doesn't mean you shouldn't inspect what you expect, but you got to give them the opportunity to make decisions. And that means sometimes they're going to make a mistake. They're going to choose the wrong broom or sweep the wrong way. And so then you have to be there to help to coach them. But at the end of the day, when you bring people in and you bring them in for the reasons you bring them in, let them fly because they'll add and contribute to your organization if you do that. If you try to over control, if you try to totally tell them what to do all the time, then number one, they're not going to enjoy what they're doing, and number two, they're not going to do a very good job. So the person who sweeps the floor means just that. If a person who sweeps the floor should choose the broom, means the person that's doing the work should have responsibility for making decisions in their work. Now, against the guiding principles, the values of the company, and the greater purpose of the company. They can't be this, independent flyer out there just doing their own thing. But
Mm-hmm.
but as long as they understand what their responsibilities are, why they're there, what the greater purpose of the organization is, and what the values of the organization are, then you got to let them fly.
Can you tell me a story or a season or a decision that you made because there's probably somebody listening right now, an owner or C-suite category that has put too much faith in the wrong person, right?
Sure.
What does that look like?
Well, first of all, if you get somebody that is struggling to do the job, at least and not meeting your expectations, then you got to have open, honest conversations with them. not blaming conversations, just open, honest, caring, loving conversations. And you ask them, you talk about why they're not getting the job that you expected done, and then you ask them what kind of help they would need to get the job done. And then they may say, I could use some coaching in this or that. Then it's up to you to make sure they get the coaching and the instructions and the help they need. Now, if you got to do it a second and third time, now maybe you've got the wrong person in the wrong place. As Jim Collins says in his Good to Great book, that you got to get the wrong people off the bus and the right people on the bus.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you make a mistake, but I say and believe you got to love them going out of the company as much as you loved them coming in. So that
Mm-hmm.
means if you have to make a decision, there should be no surprises. That they're struggling and they're not going to make it. But once you make that decision and you let them go, you got to love them as much going out the door as you loved them coming in the door. And it means you treat them with respect and dignity going out, and you do everything you can to help them find a place where they can be productive. Sometimes it's within the same organization. They're just in the wrong position.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to this, not about the coffee book, you list out 10 principles of leadership. If you were to recall those, which one or two do you think are often misunderstood?
I think the one about wearing one hat, about who you are, discovering who you are. When I talk about wearing one hat, what I'm referring to is the hat that defines who they are as a human being,
Mm,
what their values are, how they make decisions and take actions based on those values. I'm not talking about the multiple hats we wear, father, brother, mother, right? Uh, Parent, whatever. I'm not talking about those. I'm not talking about the roles, the hats we wear for certain roles. I'm talking the hat that we put on in the morning. It defines who we are, and we wear that consistently throughout the day.
mm,
I think that's the one that I'm talking about. And I mean, people have to be who they are. There's always lots of conflict and lots of discussion. Well, you can't bring your whole self to work. Sure you do. Everybody does. Bosses do. They just, if they're having a bad day, they go out of their office, they go play golf. But if you're a barista at Starbucks, you don't have that option. So, you know, people need to be who they are. And we need to honor that. That should be one of the reasons we hire them. I mean, we're hiring human beings. And that means when we interview people, we need to understand who they are as a person and make sure there's a cultural fit,
mm,
because that's the most important thing. The skills we can teach for the most part, unless we're hiring somebody to be an accountant or an architect or something like that. They have to come with a certain set of skills. But the human skills are much more difficult. So the second thing people misunderstand is my comments about servant leadership. People think that servant leadership is some kind of permissive, soft, mushy kind of leadership model. First of all, servant leadership really isn't a leadership model, it's a life model. It's
mm,
how you want to live your life. And servant leadership is about performance. It's about getting the job done. And the difference is in servant leadership, you're not doing it on the backs of people, you're doing it with people. And so, but you treat people with respect, with dignity. There's three tenets to servant leadership, as far as I'm concerned. There's many more, but other experts can talk about. But the three that I think are the most important are: number one is you help your people grow as human beings. Number two, you help your people grow as professionals, better
mm,
at their jobs. Number three, you help them achieve their own goals in life. When you as a leader do those three things well with your people, they're going to want to perform for you. They're going to want to do everything they can to be successful and help the organization be successful. So at the end of the day, though, it's about performance. You got to get the job done. It's just how you do it with people. You're direct, but you're kind.
mm,
You're forceful but loving.
mm. What taught you that? Just this position that you hold with the value of humans, like who or what was the embodiment and model of that for you as far as servant leadership goes?
Oh God, I've had a number. Probably my father, number one.
Mm,
He had a small mom and pop grocery store. I saw how he treated people, how he treated the people that worked in the store and how the people uh, how he treated the people that serves. That was probably number one. Then I was introduced to Robert Greenleaf's work on servant leadership, the servant as leader. And, you know, once I understood that, I was kind of an unconscious competent. I was a good people guy. And it was probably because it was how I wanted to be treated,
Hmm.
what motivated me. And so that's how I behaved. But once I read Robert Greenleaf's work about servant leadership, then I had a pathway and I had the words to describe who I wanted to be. And so over a long number of years, I went from being an unconscious competent, in other words, I was doing the job but didn't know how to do it, what I was really doing or how to teach it, to a person that was doing the job, but I understood what I was doing and I could teach it. That's what a conscious competent is.
Mm. Going back to the interview part, and you briefly touched on it, but the idea of making sure they're a culture fit because you can teach talent or you can teach skills. What was there a secret question or like a set of questions that you would ask that would kind of differentiate, okay, this person's legitimate and would pass the eye test?
Well, I never interviewed to skills. It did if it was something that I was really familiar with. But let's say I was interviewing a vice president of accounting or a vice president of architecture or whatever the skill set was. I wasn't that experienced in it, but I always went for who the people were first. So the questions I would ask are people-oriented questions, and they were never yes or no questions. They were, questions like, uh, do you have a brother or sister? Most times people would say yes. And I said, so what do they like about you? Don't they like about you? What,
Mm,
what do your parents wish you would have become versus what you've done? Right? What was the biggest argument you had with any other person? How did it get resolved? When did you make a mistake in a relationship where you owned the outcome of the relationship and how did you fix it? It was the
yeah.
people-centered questions, and they were never yes or no. There was always tell me a story.
With that in mind, tell me a story about a big failure at Starbucks that you experienced.
Oh, good. Where do you want me to start? There were tons. You know, I mean, probably right out of the gate, I made a big mistake. I wanted to raise wages. We were paying minimum wage at that time, and I wanted to be at least $1 an hour over minimum wage. And so we did crunched all the numbers, did all the research, and we rolled out the wage increases. And I went on vacation after that, before the first month's P&Ls came out with the new wage structure. And I got a call when the P&Ls came out while I was on vacation. And instead of it costing us 1 point in sale and cost, it cost us two. So it was double what we
Mm,
thought it was going to cost. And I immediately came back and tried to figure out where we'd made the mistake, but I couldn't go back.
mm.
I'd put wages were out there now. You can't take things away from people. So, uh, particularly when it comes to wages,
Right.
and so I had to make some decisions. I had to figure out what I was going to do. And so I had to make some pricing adjustments. I had to do some other things to make it work, but we made it work and we stayed with it. So I thought I might get fired over that. I'd only been there 3 months. That was a big mistake to make. But Howard Schultz, who was the CEO, he forgave me and we fixed it and we went on. And, there's lots of other things we did that, where we tried to rationalize cutting costs and we made big mistakes and we did damage to the culture and we had to fix that. So it was all sorts of things, but pretty much all the big mistakes centered around people, where we made mistakes with our people in some form or another. And when you do that, you break trust. And once you break trust, it's hard to get it back. And so, if we made a mistake, we had to own it.
Mm.
We had to be vulnerable about it and admit we'd made a mistake and ask for forgiveness and then move on.
Tell me a story about, or tell me something about Howard Stern that I wouldn't be able to find in a book.
Howard Schultz, I mean,
Howard Schultz. Yes.
he wouldn't be able to find in a book. Oh, God. He doesn't have a sense of humor. He's
How
a
did
wonderful guy
how did
and a
how did
loving
you
guy.
how did you
But
learn that?
by he would never understand jokes, or if you told him a joke or you brought in something. Well, one time we did this, a group of us got together because we knew that would got him, and so we did this fake ad that we had the newspaper print up for us. And you know what a French press is? It's a French press way to make coffee, and it has a plunger on it. So we did this ad, and in the ad we said, "So easy, even a monkey can do it." And we had the arm of a monkey coming down, pushing the press. Now and we put that out on his desk, right?
Okay.
And he came yelling, screaming out of himself, "Who did this? Where is this? This ad better not be running, right?" And we were just joking, you know. So we were all laughing, right? And he wasn't laughing.
Oh man. How long have you been out of Starbucks?
Oh, 13 years.
Describe retirement.
Uh, well, I was depressed for the first 2 years I was retired because I lost track of who I was. I used to tell people, "You are not Starbucks, and Starbucks is not you." And yet I fell into the trap.
Hmm.
And I had struggled to get over that. And finally, I realized that my life's work was still my life's work. I was about teaching servant leadership and helping people grow and helping people achieve their own personal goals in life. And so once I came back on track with that, then I was fine. But, uh, you know, I wouldn't advise anybody to retire. Stay with, what's your greater purpose in life? What turns you on? Find another way to do those things outside of your normal work life. There's always ways to do it. And I believe that we all have to continue contributing after our, daily work life ends. And that's what I try to do with my life. And have I always been successful at it? No, I suffered severe depression for those 2 years, and it was really bad. And I've had struggle with depression on and off my whole life. I just have gone through another bout of it, and I'm struggling with it, and for different reasons. But I had anxiety. I live with anxiety,
Hmm.
and so I've always gotten help, and I've gotten treatment when I've needed it, and I continue to do that. And this last bout was I turned 80, and it was really difficult for me because all of a sudden I realized, geez, my life is getting very short. No, I don't, my days are really numbered now. I don't know how many they're going to be, but it isn't going to be 30, and most likely it isn't going to be 10,
Hmm.
you know. So
Hmm.
there's a 30% chance that I'll live to 90. So it was difficult for me to deal with that, and I've struggled with it. I still struggle with it a little bit, but I'm working through it.
Hmm. What do you hope to accomplish? What do you hope to be true in those last days that you're talking about?
In the last days of my life,
Hmm.
what I hope, I want to be remembered for nurturing and inspiring the human spirit,
Hmm.
and I want to be remembered for my commitment to servant leadership and for my commitment to people, and knowing that I haven't done everything right, and I've made lots of mistakes that I regret, but that's what I want to be remembered for.
What would 80-year-old Howard tell 20-year-old Howard?
Be more conscious about where you're headed. Live your life with intention. Have really get your values listed out, what those values mean to you. Have a mission statement. Write down your goals. Hold yourself accountable for achieving those goals, but be conscious about it. If you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there. So lead your life with intention. You don't want to wake up at 80 years old and say, "What the hell happened?"
Hmm.
You know? And I think it's really critical.
Where, let me figure out how to frame this question. You talk about well, let me ask it this way. If it's not about the coffee had a tombstone, what's the message that you wish was on the tombstone?
Message that I lived on the tombstone. Uh, good question. Well, it has to be something around my mission statement. That my mission in life was to nurture and inspire the humans every day, nurture and inspire the human spirit, beginning with myself first and then for others, and that I nurtured and inspired the human spirit.
Mm,
That's what I'd want on my tombstone.
What would your message be to the person who's depressed right now and his work? You talked about walking through it. You also talk about
Yeah.
nurturing and inspiring the human spirit. What would your message be to them?
If you're not okay with you, then you can't help anybody else. And
Mm,
so go get help. Get help. Don't be afraid to get help. Don't be afraid to admit you're struggling, and go get professional help. And if you're a leader in an organization, and make sure that message is out there that people, if they're struggling, if they're having some emotional issues, encourage them to get help. Have resources available for them. Starbucks had a social worker on staff for 25 years that
wow.
people could go talk to, and but encourage your people because people are afraid.
Yeah.
We're afraid to show. We think it's a weakness. You know, 40 almost 40% of people in our country in which we live suffer from some kind of mental illness
Yeah.
and struggle. And most people are afraid to go get help and they don't go get help. And so they live their life in pain and it's not worth it. Get help. Don't be embarrassed. Go find somebody, if it's a minister, if it's a rabbi, if it's any spiritual leader that you know that might be able to help you, or professional psychiatric help.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
get it. Don't be
Mm.
shy.
Why do you think it's perceived as weakness to explain for a leader to come down and talk about their mental illness or mental struggle? Why is that often perceived as weakness?
Well, nobody likes to show their stuff,
Mm,
you know. Everybody wants to be seen as I'm the leader. I'm strong. You can depend on me all the time. I don't have problems, you
mhm,
know. You know,
mhm.
I make problems, uh, uh, and so people are embarrassed about it. Leaders in particular, they see it as a sign of weakness, and it's not. It just is not. It's a sign of strength that you're willing to talk about it and you're willing to go get help. It's not easy for me to talk about it. It's difficult. I've gotten more comfortable with it over time, and because I think that it helps people to hear that all kinds of people, that somebody that has run a $20 billion business, with hundreds of thousands of people, has the same issues that every other human being has. So I think it's important for people to hear that. We certainly aren't going to hear it from our political leadership, are we?
No. Yeah, you're right.
Never wants to show any sign of weakness at all. You know, any sign of, hey, I have problems. You know, I'm
Yeah.
strong. I know all the answers. I can. That's just not a fact. It's
Mm.
not true, and it's not a fact. I think there's two key words in leadership: vulnerability and authenticity. When you're both of those, then you build trust. When you don't have those, then there's no trust.
Can you differentiate between those two?
Yeah, authenticity means you are who you say you are. I always told people what my values were, and this is what you can expect from me. And vulnerability means that when you make a mistake, you own it. If you do something, you're right up there, you're vulnerable, and that means that people will hold you accountable, and they have a right to hold you accountable.
Mm.
You got to get over the being the boss syndrome.
Mm.
You're the guide and you're the coach. Yeah, and do you have leadership responsibilities and are you the boss? Yeah, sure. But it's how you do those things that really matter and really count.
If you were to write one more book, what would it be called?
Don't listen to assholes. Is that okay to say?
What would the subtitle be?
Huh?
What would the subtitle be?
What would the subtitle be? That's a good question. Don't listen to assholes. They're everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or,
That's
or
good.
be careful. Be careful. They're everywhere.
Mm. So with that idea, don't listen to assholes. Give me a story about a time you listened to an asshole.
Uh, well, I got fired because I came after him. I was in my late 20s and I was working for a very large company and my boss would come in every morning and he was a big tall guy, about 6'4". His name was Erwin Greenwolf. And Erwin would come in every morning and he'd look at me and say, "Hi, you dummy. How you doing? How
Mm.
you dummy? How you doing?" And I wasn't used to hearing language like that. Finally, it pissed me off so much that he came in and he said that to me. I got up out of my chair and I couldn't go nose to nose because my nose was almost at his belly button. But I said, "Erwin, don't you ever effing say that to me again. I'm not a dummy." Uh, 3 weeks later, he fired me. Now, later on in life, we became friends, but I wasn't going to let anybody do that to me. I don't care whether it was in jest or not. It hurt me, and I didn't want to hear those kind of things.
Mm. Last question. As you still in and out suffer with depression, and you hear those voices, it may not be Irwin's voice of saying things
Yeah,
about you that aren't true. How do you cancel out those voices?
that's the $1,000 or $1 million question:
Mm.
is how do you do that? And I have struggled at times. I have been able to do it at times. I've used affirmations to get out of it. I have an affirmation that I've repeated to myself over and over again. It goes like this: I am enough, I have enough, I do enough.
Mm.
Another one I have is I love myself unconditionally. Now, the facts of the matter is I don't practice those two all the time. When I get down, I forget that I love myself and I forget that I am enough, I have enough, I do enough. And I have to remind myself.
Mm. Okay, I'll add one more question. You you
Yeah,
said you said in our pre-call that you used the quote, I lied to my team when you said you're not Starbucks, Starbucks isn't you. You also talked about
yeah,
showing up holistically at work, right?
yeah.
How would you rephrase that? If you could go back and lead a team one more time and say that line at least, how would you reframe it?
Which line though?
You're not
What?
Starbucks and Starbucks isn't you.
Uh, how could I reframe that? That you were a whole person when you came here, and we brought you here because of who you are,
Hmm.
right? Who you are is good enough. And so
Hmm.
no matter what happens here, whether you stay or whether you leave someday, uh, you're enough, and your contribution will be great, and go contribute someplace else.
Mr. Behar, you are enough. I appreciate your time. Thank you for this interview.
Latham, you're welcome. I hope you got what you wanted.